What is up? Welcome back to my channel. It's a wrap, aka UD here, and we're back for another video. Today I am discussing the first 10 books that I've read so far this year and my thoughts on them, and just a debrief on how I'm feeling about the reading year so far. If you're interested, stick around and we'll get into it. So first thing I have to call out is the change in filming and the scenery. I've had a bag of books that just didn't fit on the shelf. I knew I needed to get another shelf. I just could not decide how I wanted to go about that. So I finally bought another shelf. That's pretty much it. But now I have to figure out how the hell am I going to film. So girl, it'll come together. So this is the filming situation for right now. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about the first 10 books I've read so far this year, my thoughts on them. The first book I have is Red Clay by Charles B. Fancher. And this was a book that I wanted to read at the end of 2025. I just didn't have enough time. And it's the first book I started off with in 2026. So this book is about Felix. Felix has just passed away. I believe it's the 1940s, and his family is at his funeral, grieving, but also recognizing, a life well lived, when they're surprised by this older white woman who comes to the funeral, and they're like, who is she? Does anybody know her? And we learned that this white woman's name is Adelaide, and her family used to own Felix and his family. Pretty much she's come to reveal to the family her relationship, how she was related to Felix and how she knew him, and kind of give context to a piece of his life that his family really doesn't know about. So, and then from there we just go into the past. I really enjoyed this one. I think this was a great way for me to start off the year. I know this was a lot of content creators that I follow, they named this as one of their favorites from last year, and I'm so glad that I got to read it because I also really enjoyed the story. Also, it's loosely based off of one of Charles' family members or great grandfathers who also had a similar story to Felix. So I've read a lot of books that explored those Black people who were enslaved, specifically in the South, and exploring the dynamics of relationships and navigating life during that time. And I feel like they've all have given a different angle or perspective in terms of reading it, which has been really interesting. And I will say that moving forward in the next few months, I might be a little bit, in terms of just that era, that specific topic, that genre, I might be a little bit fatigued. So I'm going to try to get a little bit more modern, just a little bit lighter, because it is a heavy topic. But I can't say that I haven't enjoyed any of these books that I'm about to mention that I've read that follow the same kind of narrative. So yeah, Red Clay I would recommend. If you haven't read Red Clay, I would, dedicate some time to it. The next book I have, this was an audio book. So I read Sugar last year and it made it to my top reads. I gave it a 5. I loved it. So I decided to read Groove by Bernice McFadden. That was re-released because originally the book was released under the name Genevieve. So she re-released it, new cover, under her name. Okay, so this story follows 4 friends. It is Geneva, Crystal, Noah, and Chevy. Geneva is the anchor character in this story. She's a single mother and has an ex-husband who ain't ish, but she still kind of has a relationship with him because she still yearns intimacy and to be desired. So she still kind of sleeps with him on off and on again. She's pretty much a struggling single mother. And then there's Crystal. Crystal is doing quite well for herself. She has, the picture perfect boyfriend. She has this great job and life seemingly seems to be going right. And then we have Noah. Noah is the only male friend in the friend group. He is gay and he's in a relationship, but he's struggling throughout the book because he desires women, and he's just all like, but I always know that I'm in a relationship with a man. I've always known that I want to be with men. And what does this mean that I now have this sexual desire for women? And then there's Chevy. Chevy, she wants to be, does she want to be kept? She has men that kind of like pay for her lifestyle, but she doesn't really desire love. And she just gets caught up in some mess. She gets caught up in some mess in an attempt to try to, catch a lick. So yeah, it follows these 4 women, and I was expecting like a romance, like of these women navigating life and love. Yeah, but this book took some turns I wasn't anticipating, and this is a series, so there's a follow-up to this book. I don't know why I can't think of the name. I'll probably put the picture, but yeah, this one has a follow-up. I'm probably going to listen to it. I listened to this in the audiobook and I had a very good time. This was very entertaining, and I wasn't expecting what I got. I would not consider this a romance, and baby, all 4 of them were going through it. It was kind of giving way, not really, but like in terms of their friend dynamic, I feel like they were more, which we'll get into because we'll get into way in the exhale. But in terms of their friend dynamic, they just, I mean, I feel like they treated each other pretty okay, but like there was nothing romantic about this romance. The cover is deceiving. The cover does not represent what's actually on the inside of this book, okay? Because them characters, by the end, they were taking me through it. But I'm not gonna lie, I was entertained. I read it probably in like a weekend. I read it pretty fast. Like, I was surprised. I was just surprised. I don't want to give away the story, but the story is nothing like I thought it was going to give, which is fine. But I just want y'all to know going in, don't expect a romance, okay? This book is not a romance. That's pretty much all I have to say. But the next book I read is Maud Martha. I originally got a library book, but I love the book so much. This might actually end up being one of my top reads for this year so far. First of all, Gwendolyn Brooks is a poet, and this is her only story, novel, prose this is the only prose that she's written that is not like poetry. And the book is named after the main character, Maud Martha. The book is based in, I believe, the 50s. It's set in the 50s, and it follows Maud Martha from a child like in the 30s into her adulthood. And they're very short vignettes of her life. Like each chapter is probably no more than like 3 pages. And it is the way that it's written is not like it's like I don't want to say it's flowery because it's very easy to digest, but it's rhythmic. I think that's the best way I can describe the vignettes. It's very rhythmic, and each moment, maybe they're not the most maybe traumatic or the most crazy parts of her life, but they're the most impressionable that made not only us as readers think about how Maud Martha navigates the world as a dark-skinned Black woman during the 50s in Chicago, but it really highlights the conflicts internally, externally that she faces in terms of gender and race and class. Some of the moments that really stood out for me, particularly her husband Paul. When she meets her husband Paul, it's not like this whirlwind romance. It's more this, I don't want to say it's a settling, but I give empathy to the ways that Maud Martha has to navigate the world and somehow find segments or moments of joy in order to move in her choices, in terms of her choices, how she has to grasp onto joy in whatever way she can. Everyone should read this. It's short, it's quick, but man, it's one of those reads that pack a punch. Look, Mob Martha is up there. Mob Martha is up there with Ludi Johnson in The Street. And y'all know I won't shut up about The Street. But those two are up there. Like, in terms of just good canon about navigating the world as a Black woman, it don't miss. Last year I was part of a book club and we read Ben books, and it definitely began my love of community and reading books within community. But if you aren't familiar of the podcast, But Make It Pods has a book club and also a bunch of other events that happen throughout Baltimore. And I saw that they were reading Let Us Descend. And I believe I've talked about Let Us Descend before. It's one of those books that I've wanted to read and I've actually owned for a minute. I know I talked about this because I have a signed copy from Jesmyn Ward because I went to an event where Jesmyn Ward was being honored and was lucky enough to get a signed copy of Let Us Descend. And it was a little bit of time before I even still decided to read Let Us Descend. But I finally read it because I saw that they were for the January book club. Perfect timing, what better way to start a book club than at the top of the year. But I saw that the January book club read was Let Us Descend. And of course, I've owned Let Us Descend. And it was just, for me, reading alone felt a little bit intimidating to read by myself because I know that I already knew that the story was following a young girl who is a slave, and I just couldn't find. I was like, I have to be in the right mind space to read this. So finally I decided to read it. I read it in January, and if I was going to, because so far the only other Jesmyn Ward work that I've read is Salvage the Bones, and I loved that one. But also when I initially read it when I was younger, I could not get into it. And of course I came back to it as an adult and I loved it. Let Us Descend, I enjoy, like, there were moments in the book that I really was like, oh, like it really put you in the space. Bad Bunny just did his Super Bowl performance, and the Super Bowl performance starts off with, enslaved people working in the sugar cane. There's a scene in the book where the main character, she ends up in New Orleans, and there's a scene of them working the sugarcane field during harvest, and the whole chapter just describes how physically taxing it is to work the sugarcane fields. And also, there's a scene where they describe working the cotton fields, and that's the only thing I can say is just how descriptive and how tangible the book is written. It really puts you in the mind and space of how mentally and physically taxing it was to be enslaved during this time. I do still feel like you have to be in the right head and space the right headspace to get through this one. But I'm glad I read it when I did, and I'm glad that I finally read it. I don't know if it was one of my favorites out of the 10 that I've read, but it's definitely one that I won't forget. Okay, so the next book that I read was Topaz by Beverly Jenkins, another historical it's a historical romance, but that's the running theme. The only one that hasn't really been historical, or Mom Martha is a classic. Groove wasn't historical, but a couple of videos ago, I did a used book sale haul, and I was blessed enough to get a used copy of Beverly Jenkins Topaz, which I was not aware is not in print anymore, especially the hardcover and this original cover. And the condition of this is actually perfect. Like, whoever previously had this book left it in amazing condition, and I'm gonna have to try to maintain that same condition. But yes, so when somebody let me know that, girl, you have actually with Babe in the Library, shout out to their channel, when she was just all like, girl, this is not in print anymore, I was all like, I don't know why it piqued my interest to read it. So Kate is a journalist who has a father who is a gambler, or is it a gambler, a swindler, but he steals Dix's cows or herd. And in order to pay Dick's back, he's all like, well, you can marry my daughter. You know, she's a spinster. Okay. So Dick is all like, cool, I'm gonna do that. So pretty much he saves Kate because she's a journalist, but she's caught up in, she caught up in some ish. So not only does he get Kate out of that situation, he ends up marrying her, and pretty much we follow them as they navigate this forced marriage in order to pay a debt. This is my first historical romance. I had a good time with this one. And luckily enough also, which is good timing, I got tickets for an event in Baltimore, Wine with writers, and Beverly Jenkins will be there. So I'm going to try to get this copy signed. I enjoyed this one. And I think also this was, while it was still historical, it was a little bit lighter. It was lighter than some of the other stuff that I've read this month. So, and I kept saying I need some good romance. This is kind of the romance that I love and miss. It kind of reminded me of when I used to read my mom's like romances and books when I mean, this is technically what my mom would have been reading, but but yeah, I don't know. It felt really good reading it. I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna have to read Indigo. I think I have Indigo, or is it Vivid? Did Beverly Jenkins write Vivid? I think I own. If it's not Vivid, it's Indigo. But yeah, I have some other ones that I need to get into. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. Okay, the next book I have, I'm very excited to share. This is probably another one that I really enjoyed this month, and I actually just finally got the physical copy. I read an arc, but this is Kin by Tayari Jones. It just came out on the 24th. You know, her last book was An American Marriage. Thoroughly enjoyed that one. I don't think my wrap up captured all my feelings about that book. Or I may have cut it out because I'd be ranting, y'all. So sometimes I'm just all like, y'all need to know everything. So anyway, I really enjoyed An American Marriage. And after 8 years, Tayari Jones came back with Kin. And luckily for her, the city that she chose to open the book with was DC, and she was in conversation with Jacqueline Woodson. I'll probably insert like a clip here.
But yes, I turned around and Oprah is standing there. But, you know, because she had already chosen my earlier book, you know, we had met already, so I thought she was just coming to say hi. So I said, oh, hi. I said, I'm just here because I have a book coming out. And she was like, yeah, I know. And then I felt shy. How did she say it? Well, in the Oprah voice. I know.
But she was in conversation with Jacqueline Woodson, and after work, I was lucky enough to go to the event and hear her discuss the book in conversation with Jacqueline Woodson. And I was also able to get a signed copy, which I'm happy about. I'm happy I was able to get it signed. And I had got an arc on NetGalley. Shout out. I'm going to put the comment up here too. I'm so glad. I can't remember who commented it now as I'm recording, but I'm going to have the comment posted right here. That baby girl gave me the forewarning. She said, girl, you can read now, Kin, on NetGalley. And the way I copped that arc, that galley so fast, and the way I ate Kin up. I was so invested in the friendship and the search of motherhood between Bernice and Annie. And Bernice, I think she goes by Niecy. Bernice, her mother was tragically murdered by her husband. And then the husband, or her dad, also killed himself. So she was raised by her aunt. And then Annie, her mom gave birth, disappeared, ran to Memphis, and her grandmother ended up raising her. So both of them are quote unquote motherless child. And they find a bond from that, and they are lifelong childhood friends that take different paths in life. Bernice ends up at Spelman, Annie ends up in Memphis, and it pretty much follows them coming of age and searching for motherhood and navigating their friendship. And overall, Yeah, this is a good one. This is a good one. Tayari didn't mess with this one. You really get enveloped into their world. It was funny. There was moments that were funny, heavy, enlightening. There's like this physical adventure. There's so many good things about Kin. Another historical fiction because it's based, I believe, in the 40s. And the 40s or 50s. I really enjoyed this one and highly recommended. So, okay, this I listened to an audiobook, and I'm gonna have to get a physical copy. If I Ruled the World by Amy DuBois Barnett. And Amy DuBois Barnett actually was an editor and writer in the early 2000s. And yeah, this is her story. This follows Nikki Rose. Nikki Rose, we're just following her as she navigates publishing in the 2000s, and that's the most I can say without giving too much away of the book. And yeah, this is one that I also really enjoyed. I'm gonna have to get the physical copy. I knew this was the one that out of all the books that were coming out in 2026 that I was probably the most excited for. So when it dropped, like, baby, I was ready with the Libby. One thing I will say, as I've been seeing reviews about Nikki, I feel like I have seen a decent amount of reviews saying that they don't like Nikki and baby, why was she making these choices? But I mean, for me, hindsight is 2020, and it's understandable. I understood how Nikki could get lost in the sauce, and I feel like there's probably a lot of women in publishing, especially during that time, that were a Nikki or moved through that space like Nikki. And I don't fault her character or the choices that she made. If anything, I mean, I respect that, at some point she comes to recognize or realize, and see or learn from, the choices that she's made. And I don't know if we can say that about some other people that that have been in her shoes. But I empathize with Nikki, and I appreciate, I will say this time and time again, and I'm probably going to say for another book, but I appreciate especially a Black woman who is messy and flawed and makes mistakes, because we make mistakes. We are imperfect, and I love to see an imperfect main character, and I appreciated Nikki, and I don't think the choices that she made were far-fetched or idiotic, and I can see a lot of people probably making the same mistakes that she made. This had to be written in the 2000s because publishing, also, it kind of takes me back to like Ugly Betty. Like, we can't get another Ugly Betty. We can't get another If I Ruled the World. Like, we can't get a 2025. Like, publishing is, especially of the 2000s, like, publishing is not what it used to be. It's so funny that, like, thinking of like a Carrie Bradshaw of Sex, like, we can't, that world of publishing just does not exist in this digital age. I don't think it will ever be that way moving forward again, at least in that capacity. So it was fun getting that look at the industry during that time and knowing that, like, it sits in that space and place. Okay, next book. This was the February book club. It was Junie. We actually just met about this book. Junie was probably one of my favorites also in terms of just the top 10 that I've read this month. This one follows the character Dilla June, and she is enslaved and she's grieving the loss of her sister Minnie, and her life is upended. I mean, her life is already upended because her sister Minnie has passed away, but it takes a turn when she runs into the ghost of her sister Minnie, and then Violet is courted or put, out into society to be married to this man from New Orleans called Taylor, or Mr. Taylor, and pretty much the story goes from there. And I think out of all of the, between Red Clay, Let Us Descend, and Junie, all of them follow a main character who's enslaved. This one is probably the most lightest. I don't want to say lightest, but it's probably the least draining in terms of a read. Like, I really didn't expect to, because I feel like I have to be in the right space and place to read a story where the main character is enslaved, because it is always so mentally for me grueling in terms of the violence physically and mentally. And while there is that within this book, Junie is able to read, and there's a sense of freedom and rebellion that's within this book that I enjoyed it. Yeah, I really enjoyed Junie. If I had read it last year, it probably would have been in one of my top reads, but of course I didn't. And I keep saying I want to do a video about the 2025 releases, some of my favorites from them, but this is probably one of my favorites from the 2025 releases. Another book that I listened to the audiobook, this is also a new release in 2026. Not also, but in one of them. And this is the Exes by Leodora Darlington. I'm not gonna lie, y'all, this is a thriller. This is a thriller, and it follows, what is the main character's name? Natalie. It follows Natalie. Natalie, her exes, her exes are trash, but they just keep popping up dead, right? And now she's married, and, some ish ain't right in her marriage. And they're going back, now kind of contending with her exes that have passed away, that she doesn't remember killing, but wondering how they died. And yeah, this was I did not expect it to end the way that it ended, in terms of a thriller, but it wasn't very suspenseful. It didn't really keep me on my toes. If anything, at some points it was actually quite boring, and I listened to the audiobook. I wonder if I would have loved it more if I read it. I just know that I'm probably gonna forget that I read this. Was it a Black Widow? She's a Black Widow. I wouldn't say I hated this book. It was average. I would probably give it a 3. Me and my friends decided to read Waiting to Exhale by Terry McMillan. Y'all have already seen this cover because I got it at a used book sale. And everybody knows the film. These 4 characters are iconic within the Black woman canon. I have so much to say about this book. If you already don't know what Waiting to Exhale is about, it follows 4 characters: Savannah, Robin, Bernadine, and Gloria. And Savannah, I would say, is probably the anchor. Her stories is what starts off this book, and I think it's what is all of them are kind of going through some change in their life, but Savannah's going through literally a physical setting change. Savannah is at the start of the book, she's in Seattle, but she's all well, there's really nothing for me in Seattle. I haven't found a man. She is 36 and desires partnership, and her family is in Pittsburgh. She's originally from Pennsylvania, which is how she knows Bernadine, who's also, I think she's from Philly. She's also from Pennsylvania, but now Bernadine lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and Savannah's all I'm gonna go to Phoenix, Arizona to be closer to Bernadine, who is currently married to her husband, John. So that's where the book really starts off. And then if you don't know the storylines of each of the characters, Bernadine is getting a divorce from John, or John is divorcing Bernadine to go be with this younger white woman who works at his company. Robin is between 3 men. All 3 of them don't really love her, but she really desires partnership, and she's really hung up on Russell, who is probably the worst out of the 3. The least problematic is Michael. The most problematic, I don't know, between Taylor and Russell, I don't know. But anyway, and then there's Gloria. Gloria's just stressed. She's a single mama. She owns a business. She tired. She need to sit down. But also the main thing is that she's overweight, which is I feel like the movie handled that much better than the book did. But it's supposed to be a story about 4 Black women in their mid to late 30s and navigating love and being upward mobile, is that the word? Upward mobile Black women in the 90s. As a millennial, reading it through the millennial lens, who is also, I'm not in my late 30s, I'm in my early 30s. As a woman in my early 30s, who's single and approaching that, I guess, that pressure to have these markers of career, relationship, finances, to have that all, I guess, quote unquote, in order. First of all, is this still a very entertaining read? Absolutely. I literally read this within a weekend. I have my tabs in here because I have so much to say. This is definitely a book club read. I have so much to say. Terry, I have questions for Terry McMillan. Again, the fat phobia, the homophobia that I wasn't expecting within it. Thinking of all the black men within the book and their relationship to masculinity and the quote unquote good men and like what they possess and what they don't possess, and these negotiations that these women go through in order to find this perfect or this ideal love. Even though I will say that for all of the men that they say no to, like I would agree, but also I'm a single woman as well, and I feel like I go through the same negotiations. I know for me these women are unbearable, but I do still empathize with them. It's in the same way that I empathize with Queenie, because I understand the position that they're in the challenges in terms of the choices that they have to make. I empathize. This is me thinking about Queenie. I empathize with how she rationalizes and negotiates her relationship with men and the casual sex that she has within the book. And the same with waiting to exhale. Like, I don't want to heavily judge these women because I know these women, and in some of these cases I've made the same choices or I've had to negotiate. Maybe in the end I'm just like, this ain't the man for me, but I've had to make the same negotiations. And I think also it's so interesting reading, you know, now that you've seen all the books that I've read and going through the choices that the women, that enslaved women have had to make, that the women that their parents, you know, the silent age that are before boomers have had to make, and thinking about the period or the time that these women are coming into age or are grown women. You know, these four characters would have been boomers. They would have been probably born in like the 50s. They would have been in their 20s and coming to age during the time of, you know, birth control and abortion rights and this new found sovereignty over their body in terms of like sexual, which is crazy to think about, because it's like we're in like 60s and 70s is considered, you know, sexual liberation and this sexual freedom that their parents didn't have, that they now have, and this access to be classed in money that is not tied to a man that their parents didn't have, and navigating that and then negotiating how I show up and be in relationship with men. And then thinking about, you know, like Maud Martha and thinking of the street, like in both stories there's a moment where they're fighting for this sense of independence and the sense of self that they know that they're unable to attain within the confines of the world that they currently live in. Like, there's this moment where Maud Martha decides for a second that she wants to be a domestic worker, and then she's all like, never mind. And then there's the same with that period in the street where Ludi Johnson is a domestic worker, and then she's just all like, well, I'm back home. I'm not domestic working. And there's like thinking about Black women within domesticity in terms of labor, and then how that looks as a Black woman. And there's like this attachment to domesticity and like womanhood, but then also this complicated relationship as a Black woman in terms of domesticity and labor, and how this new attained, like in terms of career, this new careered Black woman, and again they're new, and in that change of dynamics and it being this first generation to try to be in relationship with men in this new dynamic, like how they rationalize or negotiate in that way. I feel like Bernadine kind of goes through that negotiation. I don't know if it's done as thoughtfully, but if anything, I don't think it's meant to be. I feel like we're just meant to I don't think at least I don't think, that's why I'm like, I wonder what Terry McMillan thinks, because I feel like she's just telling the story of the Black boomer woman, but not necessarily trying to give her deep thoughts and analysis. Like, it is what it is. What we get from it is what we get from it. Like, I don't think it's supposed to be like feminist in any way, or like it's supposed to, you know, incite anything in the reader. But it did make me think. It made, because if anything, the woman away in the exhale is my mother. Like, pretty much they were my mother was pretty much these characters' ages at the time of this book. And I was literally thinking of her and my aunts, and if anything, having a little bit more empathy about, you know, the world that they grew up in and the way that it's changing, and how at that moment they're negotiating the life that they're living versus the life that they believe that they should have or want. Like, trying to negotiate what they have access to and their desires. And this is me trying to be as succinct as possible, but I have so many thoughts about Waiting to Exhale and about these women. And if anything, I'm not saying that the movie still isn't good. Like, it still touches on all the points, but I don't think it gets into as much of the ugliness that these characters possess that trigger these thoughts in me. Like, if anything, it's very surface, the movie, which granted, like, you can't get into all the weeds of a damn near 400-page book. But yeah, these characters are very messy in the book, and they have some thoughts about life that I'm just like, oof. And I don't even know if they're not really that great friends to each other. And there's actually within this book, there's more moments in the movie where they're all together and they show care for one another than there is in this book. There's a lot of moments where they don't show up for each other when they need to because they're holding space for a man. But yeah, Waiting to Exhale. This is a loaded one, and I'm currently listening to Game to Happy, so you're probably seeing the next wrap up, but it don't get better. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, that was very long-winded. That's all the books that I read so far in 2026. Let me know how your reading year is going so far, some of the books that you've read. Please, y'all, if y'all read Waiting to Exhale, can we talk about it in the comments? Because I have so many thoughts about these four ladies. These four ladies. Let me know what you all have been reading. Let me know your thoughts on any of these books if you read them. And again, or as always, we're continuing our conversation in the comments. Deuces.